Hey, it's Todd Burrier from toddburrier.com, and we're going to talk a little bit today about how to give performance feedback, which is really, really huge if you're in any sort of leadership or management position, but also if you are just working with a teammate in some capacity. And first thing I want to say is that the time to give performance feedback is not at an annual review, right? I mean, often that's when it comes. And that's the last time it should come, because when that happens, things are a surprise. It should never be a surprise. People need to know how they're doing. There's no other way they're going to be able to improve. The other thing is, before I give you these 4 tips on specifically how to do it, and I'm going to give you a really simple recipe that will work very, very well, because I know that especially if it's performance feedback based on poor performance, that can be a little challenging, right? It doesn't feel good. And if you have a recipe for how to do it and you know that the other person is going to be okay in this conversation, it makes it a little bit easier for you to address it and to lift that person up, which, again, if you're in some sort of management or leadership position, that's your job. Your job is to grow people and help them become more effective and more empowered. So there is an entire set of communication principles that go into this, where you really have to help that person feel valued and understood and all these kinds of things. We're not addressing that here. I'm just giving you a simple recipe for how to deliver it, okay? So the first is, what kind of feedback are you giving, right? Are you giving positive performance feedback because they did a good job? Or are you giving developmental feedback, which maybe you could call it constructive feedback, or overcoming poor performance feedback, or whatever language you want to use? It's really, that's what's going to be, right? It's going to be one or the other. Either they did well or they didn't, and you need to provide feedback in both circumstances. So the way you go, first you identify what it's going to be. Next is you have to be very specific, right? You have to be extremely specific. If they did a good job, you can't just go, hey, you did a great job. That's just not, that doesn't help. It doesn't help them replicate. It doesn't help them to advance, because they don't know what that means. It's too ambiguous. You have to be extremely specific. What did they do, or what did they not do, right? That's what you have to do. So if they did well, specifically, what did they do well? And if they did poorly, specifically, where they need to improve, okay? So you got to be very specific. Next is, it's got to be timely. This, I mentioned earlier, it can't be an annual review or a 6-month review. That's just way too long. If someone is working at something, it should be a little bit of a constant, but there should be a debriefing time, right? There should be a specific set time where you review how they've done, how it's gone. And so ideally, as soon as the job is done, that's when you would do it, right? You would do it. So maybe it's a project that was a week long or a month long. That's when it should happen. It shouldn't be 3 months later, 6 months later. You will have missed the window, not only to help them advance, but to provide encouragement. And more importantly, it sort of shows that you don't really value them very much if you're not willing to give them feedback in a timely fashion. So it demonstrates you care when you do it timely, and you then also correctively have made the correction faster, which I don't think I need to actually talk about that one, because most people would be happy to typically jump in and do the corrective thing right away, because again, you're responsible, right? The one thing you can't delegate is responsibility in any sort of management or leadership role. And so you're going to tend to do it if they didn't do well relatively quickly. But do you do it when they did well, right? And that's key. You got to do it, because then you have bolstered their confidence. You have someone that's more empowered in their workplace. And then the last piece is, it's got to be balanced, right? So this is specifically true for the developmental type feedback, because if someone has struggled in their performance, you've got to help correct that. But at the same time, you got to protect the individual. The human being isn't the poor performance, right? They're not the work. They are a person. And so you have to separate that out. And so part of doing that is to acknowledge what they did well, inside of this, because it's likely they didn't mess up everything, right? I mean, even if they did mess up most stuff, but they worked really hard, you got to acknowledge the effort, right? You got to praise the effort. And so you want to balance the feedback by letting them know what they did well, and then talking about what they need to improve. And a little nugget here would be, instead of just saying, and this you didn't do very well, you should have done this, ask the question to involve them in this and say, so this part didn't go as well as you would have liked it to, and we didn't get the outcome we wanted. What do you think you could have done differently? How else might you have approached it? Right? Think about the power you're transferring here. You're giving them a chance, right, to have ownership in solving it, which is really a powerful thing. It's demonstrating that you trust them, that you believe in them, and they're going to feel that from you. And so by giving them balanced feedback like this, you're raising them up. You're raising them up a little bit. And the other thing too is celebrate small wins. Right? You don't just provide feedback or praise or encouragement when someone does something extraordinary. If they've made a little advancement, a little gain, man, that is a great thing to celebrate, because that's worthy of it. That you want to grow people. That's the thing that you want to do. And then the way you want to do it, right? The format is situation, task, right? So it's either the situation or the task that they were involved in, and then the actions they took, and then the result, right? So that's what you're covering. So you cover it that way, and you do it in that specific, timely, and balanced fashion, and you will really help people grow and develop and do better next time, or do even better next time. So I hope this was helpful. Feel free to check out my training area in my toddburrier.com website, which is listed below. I do leadership training for corporations, and obviously this would be one little piece of a nugget of an area that I teach on. So I hope this was helpful for you. Have a great day.